welcome, and thank you for spending part of your night here. This is Quiet History. Before we start, I always like to wonder where you are right now. Maybe it's the middle of the night where you live. Maybe it's late afternoon on the other side of the world. Maybe you're just lying in the dark with the lights low, ready to let the day go. Wherever you are and whatever the time is for you, you're welcome here. I'm glad you came. Tonight we're going to follow one man's whole life in China about 500 years ago. A poor young man from a small village who begins with nothing at all and slowly, over many years, builds himself up into a wealthy merchant. That's the story. A long, slow climb, step by patient step. So tuck in your blankets and let yourself get comfortable. There's nothing here you need to follow. No plot to keep hold of, no names to remember, no puzzle waiting at the end. There's only a life unfolding quietly, the way real lives do, from small beginnings towards something greater. If your attention drifts, let it drift. If you fall asleep long before he makes his fortune, that's exactly what this is for. His story will go on without you. We're in the time of the Ming, a great and settled age in China. It's a world of walled towns and busy markets, of rivers and canals crowded with boats, of silk and porcelain and tea moving along the roads and waterways in enormous quantities. Silver is flowing into the country from across the seas, and trade is booming. And for a young man with sharp eyes and a willing back, there is opportunity if he can find it and hold on to it and not be crushed by all the ways the world can crush a poor man first. Our man doesn't know any of that yet. Tonight, at the start, he's just a young man in a poor family in a small village with empty hands and an empty purse, standing at the very bottom of the world, looking up. Everything is still ahead of him, so settle in and let your breathing slow. We'll begin where he begins, with nothing in the village, and we'll follow him out into the wide world and watch him rise year by year, as far as his patience and his luck will carry him. There's no hurry. We have all night and his whole life ahead of us. Our story begins in a small village in the countryside of Ming, China, in a poor farming family, on a morning much like any other. The village is a cluster of low houses, mud brick and timber and thatch set among the fields. It isn't much to look at. A few dozen families live here, and they have lived here for as long as anyone can remember, working the same land their grandparents worked, tied to it by custom and by need and by the simple fact that there is nowhere else to go. The land is decent, but there isn't much of it, and it must be split among too many sons, so that each family's share grows a little thinner with every generation. Our young man is one of several children in such a family. He is not the eldest, which matters, because the eldest son will inherit what little there is, the house and the largest share of the land, along with the duty of caring for the parents in their old age. The younger sons must make their own way. There is a place for them in the family while they are needed for the work, but not enough land to divide among them all, not enough to build a life on. Everyone in the family knows this without ever quite saying it. The younger sons will have to leave sooner or later and seek their fortune somewhere else, or resign themselves to a life of laboring on other men's fields. He grows up doing the work of a farmer's child. He carries water and gathers fuel and mines the animals. He learns the rhythm of the seasons in his body, the flooding of the fields and the planting and the long hot weeding and the harvest and the winter's rest. It is hard work and it is endless, and it yields, in a good year, just barely enough, and in a bad year, not enough at all. He knows hunger, the ordinary hunger of the poor, the belt tightened in the lean months before the harvest, the watery gruel stretched to feed too many mouths. But he is a bright boy, sharper than his brothers, quicker to see how things fit together, quicker to count and to reckon and to notice where a small advantage might be found. His family notices it in the vague way that poor families notice a clever child with a mix of pride and worry, because cleverness in a poor boy has nowhere to go and can turn as easily to trouble as to good. There is no money for schooling, no path to the examinations that might, in a dream, lift a family up into the ranks of the officials. That road is for the sons of those who can afford books and tutors and years of idle study. For a boy like him, there is only the land, and the land is not enough. So he grows toward manhood carrying a restlessness he can't quite name. He loves his family and his village well enough, but he can feel the walls of the place closing around him, the smallness of the life laid out for him, the certainty that if he stays, he will spend his years exactly as his father spent his, bent over the same fields, worrying over the same weather, never a copper coin to spare. Something in him refuses it. Something in him looks at the road that leads out of the village, the road the peddlers and the tacksmen and the occasional traveller come and go along, and wonders where it goes and what a man might find at the other end of it. He doesn't know yet that he will follow that road. He doesn't know what waits for him out there, the years of struggle, the slow, hard climb, the fortune that lies at the far end of a great deal of patience. Tonight he is only a poor young man in a poor village, with clever eyes and empty hands, standing at the beginning of everything. But the beginning is where every great climb starts, and his has already quietly begun. The decision to leave is not made in a single moment. It gathers slowly, like water rising behind a dam, until one day it simply spills over, and the thing that was unthinkable becomes the thing that must be done. For a young man of a poor family, leaving the village is a serious step, not to be taken lightly. The village is safety of a kind. It is the known world, where everyone knows him and his family, where there is always at least a bowl of something and a roof, where the customs are familiar and the dangers are the ordinary dangers of a life he understands. Beyond the village lies the unknown, and the unknown in this age is genuinely dangerous. The roads have bandits. The towns are full of strangers who owe him nothing. A young man alone, without family or connections, is prey to every kind of trouble, and many who set out to seek their fortune are never heard from again, swallowed up by the wide, indifferent world. But staying has its own certain cost, and he has counted it. He has watched his older relatives, the younger sons of the generation before, the ones who stayed. He has seen how they became hired hands on other men's land, working from dark to dark for a bare living, growing old with nothing to show for it, dependent and poor to the end of their days. He does not want that. He would rather risk the dangers of the road than accept the certainty of that slow grinding smallness. Better to gamble on the unknown than to lose for certain by staying. There is a conversation with his parents, or perhaps several, halting and difficult. They do not want him to go, and yet they understand why he must, because they have done the same arithmetic he has, and they know there is no future for him here. His mother weeps or holds it in, which is worse. His father, a man not given to words, says little, but presses on him what small help the family can spare. A few coins saved against emergencies, some food for the road, a garment against the cold. It is not much. It is everything they have to give. He understands the weight of it, and he takes it, and he promises, as every young man in his place has promised, to send money home when he has made his fortune, and to come back some day in better circumstances than he leaves. And then there is the leaving itself in the grey light of an early morning, so as to get a good start on the road. The village is barely stirring. A few figures come to see him off, family and a friend or two. There are no grand speeches. There is only the awkward, aching business of farewell, the embrace, the last look, the turning away. He shoulders his small bundle, everything he owns knotted into a cloth, and he sets his face to the road, and he walks. For a long while he can still see the village behind him when he turns to look, the familiar roofs, the smoke of the morning fires growing smaller. And then the road bends, or a rise of ground comes between, and the village is gone from sight, and he's alone, truly alone, perhaps for the first time in his life. There is fear in that moment, a cold clutch of it, a sudden enormity of what he has done. But there is something else too, underneath the fear, something rising, a kind of lightness, a widening. The whole world has just opened up in front of him, unknown and dangerous and full of possibility, and it is his to walk into. He does not look back again. He walks on toward the town, toward the future, toward whatever is waiting. The first step of the long climb has been taken. He's on his way. The road to the town is his first real taste of the wider world, and it teaches him quickly that the world is bigger, busier, and stranger than anything the village prepared him for. At first the road is quiet and familiar, running through farmland much like his own, past villages much like the one he left. But as he walks, the traffic on the road thickens. He begins to meet others, and the sheer variety of them amazes him. There are farmers driving animals to market, and porters bent double under enormous loads, and peddlers with their packs, and here and there a merchant on a mule or in a cart, better dressed, with the look of a man who has money. There are travellers of every sort, going about business he can only guess at, and each one is a small window into a life, utterly different from his own. He learns the etiquette of the road as he goes, mostly by watching and by making mistakes. He learns to be wary, to keep his small bundle close, to be careful whom he talks to and what he reveals. He is warned, by a kindly older traveller perhaps, about the dangers, the thieves who prey on green young men fresh from the countryside, the cheats and tricksters who can smell an innocent at a distance. He is exactly the kind of young man they look for, and he knows it, and he holds himself carefully, trying to seem less new than he is, watching everyone, trusting no one. The distances are greater than he imagined. The village measured the world in the walk to the nearest fields, the nearest market town. Now he walks for a whole day and is still, it seems, in the middle of nowhere, the town he seeks still far ahead. He sleeps his first night away from home badly, curled at the roadside or in some cheap shelter, cold and afraid and aching, and waits stiff and hungry to walk again. The food his family gave him must be rationed carefully, for he does not know how long it must last, and he has almost no money to buy more. But there are wonders too that ease the hardship. He sees things he has never seen. A great river, wider than any water he has known, with boats upon it. A stone bridge, arching high and graceful, built by hands long dead. A temple on a hill, its roofs curving against the sky. And everywhere, the land itself unrolling before him, hills and valleys and plains he never knew existed, the world proving itself far larger and far more varied than the small green corner of it he grew up in. Each new sight enlarges him, stretches his sense of what is possible, feeds the restless hunger that drove him out in the first place. And then, at last, the town. He smells it before he sees it. The smoke and the crowding and the sharp mixed smells of many people living close together. Then he crests a rise, and there it is below him, spread out behind its walls, larger than any place he has ever imagined, A whole world of roofs and streets and moving crowds, humming with a life so much greater than the village that it takes his breath. For a moment he simply stands and stares. This is where he is going. This is where a poor young man might, if he is clever and lucky and tireless, begin to build something. He gathers himself and shifts his bundle and walks down toward the gate, toward the town, toward the beginning of his real life. Passing through the town gate for the first time is like stepping into another world, and for a while our young man can only stand and let it wash over him, overwhelmed. The town inside the walls is a crush of life such as he has never known. The streets are narrow and crowded, lined with shops and stalls, and every kind of person seems to be moving through them at once. There are the shopkeepers calling out their wares, and the food sellers with their steaming pots, and porters shoving through with their loads, and fine ladies in sedan chairs carried by servants, and beggars in the gutters, and children darting everywhere underfoot. The noise is tremendous, a wall of voices and clatter and cries. The smells are overwhelming, cooking and smoke and dung and incense and the press of bodies. After the quiet of the village, it is almost too much to take in. He wanders the streets in a daze, gaping like the country boy he is, which marks him at once to every sharp eye in the place as fresh prey. He must learn quickly to master his face, to stop staring, to move with purpose even when he has no purpose, to look as though he belongs, even though he belongs nowhere. It is his first lesson in the great art he will spend his life perfecting, the art of seeming more than he is, of projecting a confidence he does not feel, of holding his own among strangers. The town runs on money, and this too is a shock to him. In the village, much of life ran on barter and custom and the exchange of labor, on the slow reciprocity of neighbors. Here, everything has a price, and everything must be paid for, in the copper coins that change hands ceaselessly all around him. A place to sleep costs money. Food costs money. Even a drink of water, in some places, costs money. His tiny store of coins, which seemed a small treasure in the village, he now sees is almost nothing here. A handful of coppers that will keep him alive only a few days if he is careful, and not even that if he is not. So the first and most pressing problem is simply survival. He must find, very quickly, some way to earn, or he will starve on these crowded streets, one more anonymous body in a town full of the desperate. There is no safety net for a young man like him, no family, no friends, no one who will notice or care if he fails. The town is magnificent, and it is merciless, full of opportunity and full of ruin, and which he finds depends entirely on his own wits and effort and luck. That first night he sleeps rough in some corner or doorway, or cheap crowded lodging, hoarding his coins, his belly tight with hunger and worry. It is a low moment, perhaps the lowest, the great adventure suddenly reduced to the raw question of whether he will eat tomorrow. He is further from home than he has ever been, alone among indifferent strangers, with almost nothing, in a place whose rules he barely understands. But he does not despair. There is something in him too stubborn for despair. He lies awake and he thinks, turning the problem over, watching in his mind the things he saw that day. The porters owning coppers hauling loads, the boys running errands, the countless small ways that money moved and might be caught. Somewhere in all that ceaseless human bustle, there is a place for him, a foothold, a first small way to earn his bread. He only has to find it. And in the morning, hungry and determined, he sets out to look. The first work he finds is the lowest kind, the work that goes to those with nothing but their bodies to sell, and he takes it gratefully, because it is the first rung of the ladder, and there is no other way up. He becomes at first a carrier of loads. It requires no skill and no capital. only a strong back and a willingness to labor, and these he has. He stations himself where such work is found, at the market, at the wharf, at the town gate, wherever goods must be moved and hands are needed, and he offers himself, and he is hired for a few coppers to haul and to carry and to lift. It is brutally hard. The loads are heavy, the hours are long, the pay is tiny, and at the end of a day of it, he is wrung out, his body aching in every joint, fit only to eat what little he can afford and fall into an exhausted sleep. But it is money. It is, for the first time, money that he has earned himself, in the town, by his own effort, and however small it is, it means survival. It means he eats. It means he does not starve on the street. And that alone, in those first weeks, is a kind of triumph, the crossing of the first and most dangerous threshold, from a young man who might die anonymous and forgotten, to a young man who has, however precariously, a place in the working life of the town. He is careful with what he earns, ferociously careful. This is a thing that sets him apart, and it will matter greatly in the years to come. Many young men in his position, earning their first coppers, spend them as fast as they come, on food and drink and small pleasures, on the cheap comforts that ease a hard life. He does not. He has a hunger larger than his belly, a hunger to rise, and he understands, without being taught, the single hard truth on which every fortune is built, that to get ahead you must spend less than you earn, and save the difference, however small, however painful. So he lives on almost nothing. He eats the cheapest food. He sleeps in the cheapest corner. And every day he sets aside some tiny portion of his earnings, a coin, 2 coins, ordered away, the first small seed of everything that is to come. He watches too, always watching as he works. The carrying of loads takes him all over the town, into the markets and the warehouses and the shops, and everywhere he goes he studies how things work. He sees how the merchants deal, how goods come in and go out, how prices are set and haggled, where things are cheap and where they are dear. He is getting an education, though no one is teaching him. An education in trade and in money and in the workings of the town, absorbed through his eyes and his ears as he labors. He is a quick study and he forgets nothing, and slowly in his mind a picture is building of how the whole great machine of commerce turns, and where a clever man might insert himself to catch a little of the wealth flowing through. It is a hard, poor, grinding life, this first stage, and it would break many, or trap them forever at the bottom. But for him it is not a trap, but a beginning. He does the lowest work, and he saves his coppers, and he watches and learns, and he waits for his chance, the small opening that will let him take the first real step up. He does not know yet what it will be, but he is ready for it. He is preparing for it every single day, in a way that most of those around him are not. And in a world of opportunity, the one who is ready is the one who rises. As the weeks become months, he begins to understand the town, not as a bewildering chaos, but as a system, a great living machine of buying and selling, and understanding it is the key that will unlock everything. The town, he comes to see, is a place where things flow. Goods flow into it from the countryside and from far away, food and raw materials and finished wares, and goods flow out of it again. And at every stage of that flow, money changes hands, and wherever money changes hands, there is a chance for someone to earn a little by helping it along. The farmer brings his grain to market and sells it. A merchant buys it and stores it and sells it again at a higher price to a baker or a brewer or a shipper who sends it elsewhere. At each exchange, someone takes a small profit, the reward for moving the goods one step closer to to the person who finally needs them. The whole town is a vast web of these exchanges, endlessly repeating, and the wealth of it lies not in making things, but in moving them, in buying where a thing is cheap and selling where it is dear. This is the great insight, and it is the merchant's insight, and he grasps it in his bones in a way that the born farmer never quite can. A farmer makes wealth from the land, slowly, by labor, one harvest a year. A merchant makes wealth from difference, from the gap between one price and another, and he can turn that difference over and over, many times in a year, compounding a small advantage into a large one. The farmer is bound to one place and one slow rhythm. The merchant is free to move, to seek out the differences, to go where the profit is. For a landless young man with nothing but his wits, this is the road upward, the only road, and he sets his feet on it. He begins, in small ways, to trade. Not yet as a merchant, he has no capital for that, but in the tiny ways available to a poor man. He notices that a certain thing is cheap in one part of the town and dear in another, and with a few of his hoarded coppers, he buys it cheap and carries it across and sells it dear and pockets the difference. It is a trivial sum, the profit on such a trade, a coin or two. But it is profit, made not by the sweat of carrying, but by the cleverness of buying and selling, and it thrills him in a way the wages of labor never did. This, he knows at once, is what he is meant to do. This is the thing he is good at, the noticing of differences, the seeing of chances, the quick reckoning of what a thing is worth here and what it is worth there. So he begins to shift, by degrees, from a carrier of loads to a petty trader, a dealer in small things. He still labors when he must to keep himself fed, but more and more he spends his energy and his tiny capital on these small trades, buying and selling, always watching for the difference he can exploit. His hoard grows, slowly, not from wages now, but from profit, and though it is still pitifully small, it is growing in a different way, a way that can compound, a way that has no ceiling. A laborer can only earn so much, bounded by the hours in a day and the strength in his back. A trader's earnings have no such limit. They can grow with his capital and his cleverness, and there is no telling how far. He is still poor. He is still, to any eye, a nobody, a shabby young man scraping by at the bottom of the town. But something fundamental has changed. He has found his path. He has discovered the thing he was born to do, and he has begun, in the smallest possible way, to do it. The seed is planted. Now it only needs time and patience and work and a little luck to grow. Every rising merchant needs a first real break, a chance to step up from petty trading to something larger, and for our young man it comes, as such things often do, through a person rather than a plan. He has been noticed. All those months of hard work and careful dealing and sharp watching have not gone unseen. In a town where most young laborers are careless, or lazy, or dishonest, or given to drink, he stands out quietly, simply by being reliable, honest, hardworking, and clever. And in the world of trade, where a man must constantly trust others with his goods and his money, these qualities are worth more than gold. Someone with capital and business, an established merchant, a shopkeeper, a trader of some standing, sees in this diligent young man exactly the kind of person he needs, and offers him a position, a step up, a chance. Perhaps it begins as a job as an assistant, a helper in a shop or a trading house, handling goods, keeping simple accounts, running errands that require trust. It is regular work now, with regular pay, better than the hand-to-mouth scrabble of petty trading. And it comes with something even more valuable than the wages. It comes with access. He is now inside a real business, seeing how it works from within, learning the trade at the elbow of someone who knows it, building relationships with suppliers and customers and other merchants. He is no longer on the outside looking in. He has a foot in the door. He throws himself into it. Whatever the master asks, he does, and does well, and does more than is asked. He makes himself indispensable. The young man who can be trusted, who never cheats, who never shirks, who catches the errors others miss, and seizes the chances others overlook. He learns everything he can. The goods and their qualities, the suppliers and their tricks, the customers and their needs, the whole intricate knowledge of the trade that cannot be learned from the outside, but only absorbed by working within it. And he keeps saving. Still, his wages now larger, his hoard growing faster, the foundation of his own future business slowly accumulating. The relationship with the master is the making of him. A good master is more than an employer. He's a teacher, a patron, a door into a wider world. He introduces the young man to his own contacts, vouches for him, lets him take on more responsibility, trusts him with larger matters. In a world where business ran on personal trust and reputation and connection, to be taken up by an established man was to be handed the single most valuable thing a newcomer could receive, a place in the network, a name that others would recognize and deal with. The young man understands this, and he guards the trust placed in him as the precious thing it is, knowing that his whole future depends on his reputation, that one act of dishonesty would destroy everything, and that his good name, carefully built and jealously kept, is the true capital on which he will rise. And rise he does, within the business, from errand boy to trusted assistant, to something like a junior partner, taking on more, earning more, learning more. His value to the master growing year by year. It is not yet his own success. He is still working for another man, still building someone else's fortune more than his own. But he is being carried upward all the same, lifted by the connection, gaining the knowledge and the capital and the reputation that he will need when the time comes to strike out on his own. He is serving an apprenticeship, in effect in the school of trade, and he is the best pupil that school has seen in a long while, and everyone who deals with him begins, quietly, to mark him as a young man who will go far. There comes a point after years of faithful service and patient saving when the young man, now not so young, is ready to step out on his own, and the decision to do so is one of the great turnings of his life. He has accumulated 3 things, and he needs all 3. He has capital, the hoard he has saved so carefully over so many years, small still by the standards of great merchants, but enough at last to fund a modest business of his own. He has knowledge, the deep practical understanding of trade, that he has absorbed by working within it, the feel for goods and prices and markets that cannot be bought or taught, but only earned by experience. And he has reputation, a name known and trusted among the merchants of the town, the network of contacts and relationships that will let him buy and sell and borrow and deal. With these 3, capital, knowledge, and reputation, a man can begin. Without any one of them, he cannot. He has spent years assembling all 3, and now, finally, he has them. To leave the security of his position and strike out alone is a real risk, and he knows it. As an assistant, a trusted man in an established business, he is safe, comfortable, well paid, his future assured. To leave that and begin his own venture is to give up certainty for possibility, to stake everything he has built on his own judgment and effort and luck. If he fails, he loses it all. The years of saving, the hard-won position, and finds himself back near the bottom, older now and with less time to recover. Many men reaching this point do not take the leap. They stay safe. They remain comfortably someone else's trusted man to the end of their days. But he did not leave his village and endure all those years of struggle to end as another man's servant, however well treated. The hunger that drove him out is still in him. The hunger to rise, to build something of his own, to be not a helper in another man's fortune, but the master of his own. And so carefully, with much thought and planning, he makes the leap. He takes his leave of his old master on good terms, for he is far too wise to burn a bridge he may need again. And with his savings and his knowledge and his good name, he sets up in business for himself. It is a modest beginning, this first independent venture, suited to his still modest capital. He deals in some particular kind of goods that he knows well, that he has judged offers good opportunity, buying and selling on his own account, now for his own profit and his own loss. Every decision is his, every risk is his, every copper of profit is his to keep, and every loss his to bear. It is frightening and it is exhilarating, this sudden full ownership of his own fate, and he feels, in those first days of trading on his own account, more alive than he has ever felt, more fully himself, doing at last, entirely for himself, the thing he was born to do. His capital is thin, and a single bad stroke could wipe him out. He must be careful and shrewd, and above all, he must not be greedy, must not overreach, must not stake more than he can afford to lose. He grows his business slowly, cautiously, ploughing his profits back in, letting his capital build, taking no unnecessary risks, learning the particular challenges of running his own venture as opposed to serving in another's. It is slow going, and there are worries, and there are surely small setbacks. But the business survives its first tender season, and then begins steadily to grow. He is a merchant now, in his own right, a small one, but his own. The foundation is laid. The real climb has begun. The goods he chooses to deal in are the foundation of his business, and his choice reflects both the opportunities of his age and his own hard-won understanding of where profit lies. Ming China is a land rich in goods that the whole world wants, and a merchant's first task is to find his place within that great flow of commerce. There is silk, the most famous of all, woven in the workshops of the great cities, prized across the whole known world for its beauty and its lightness and its sheen. There is porcelain, the fine hard ceramic that no other land can yet match, the bowls and vases and dishes that grace tables from the courts of China to lands far across the sea. There is tea, drunk everywhere, traded everywhere, moving in enormous quantities along the roads and rivers. There is cotton cloth, and lacquerware, and paper, and countless other goods, the products of a vast and skilled and industrious people. Our merchant cannot deal in all of these, not yet. A small merchant must specialize, must find the particular goods he understands, that suit his capital, that offer opportunity he can seize. Perhaps he deals in cloth, buying from the weavers and selling to the shops, perhaps in some foodstuff, or some raw material, or some manufactured ware. Whatever it is, he comes to know it thoroughly, its qualities and its grades, its sources and its markets, the seasons of its supply and demand, everything that a man must know to buy it well and sell it well. This deep knowledge of his particular trade is his edge, the thing that lets him see opportunities others miss and avoid pitfalls others fall into. He learns the crucial art of judging quality, which in many goods is subtle and hard, and on which profit or loss can entirely depend. A merchant who can tell fine silk from poor at a glance, who can judge the grade of tea by its look and smell, who knows the difference between porcelain that will sell and porcelain that will not, has an enormous advantage over one who cannot. Our merchant develops this eye, this connoisseur's knowledge of his goods, honed by years of handling them, until he can assess in moments what a lesser dealer would need hours to puzzle out, or would get wrong entirely. He learns the geography of his trade too, where his goods are made and where they are wanted, the routes between, the costs and risks of moving them. Ming China is crisscrossed by trade routes, above all by the great network of rivers and canals, including the mighty Grand Canal that links the rich south to the north, along which barges carry goods in staggering quantities. A merchant who understands this geography, who knows where a thing is cheap and where it is dear and how to get it from one to the other, holds the key to profit. Our merchant studies it all, building in his mind a map of opportunity, the differences in price from place to place that a clever man can turn to gold. And he learns the rhythms of his trade, the seasons and cycles of supply and demand, when goods are plentiful and cheap, when they are scarce and dear, how to buy when others are selling and sell when others are buying, how to hold a stock through a lean time and release it when prices rise. This timing, this feel for the market's rhythm is among the subtlest of the merchant's arts and among the most profitable, and he develops it slowly, through experience, through wins and losses, until he has a sense for the market that seems almost like instinct, but is really the distillation of long and careful attention. With these arts, knowledge of his goods, judgment of quality, mastery of the geography and the rhythms of his trade, he builds his small business, trade by careful trade, profit by patient profit, laying the foundation, deep and solid, on which a far greater fortune will one day stand. As his business steadies and his confidence grows, the merchant faces the first great expansion of his world, the decision to trade not just within his town but between towns, to travel, to reach for the larger profits that lie in bridging greater distances. The principle he grasped long ago, that profit lies in the difference between prices in different places, has a natural conclusion that the greater the distance a merchant is willing to cover, the greater the differences he can exploit and the greater the profits he can make. Trading within one town, the differences are small, quickly competed away by other traders. But between towns, between regions, between the far corners of the vast empire, the differences can be enormous. A thing common and cheap in one place may be rare and precious in another. A few weeks' journey away, the merchant who can move goods across that distance can reap the whole of that difference, and it can be very large indeed. But distance means risk and cost and time, and these are not small things. To send goods across the country is to expose them to every hazard of the road and the river, to bandits and storms and accidents and spoilage. It is to tie up his capital for weeks or months, unable to touch it, while the goods make their slow way to market. It is to trust, often, in agents and partners and carriers he cannot personally watch. The larger profits of long-distance trade come wrapped in larger dangers, and many a merchant has been ruined by a single caravan lost or a single cargo sunk. To reach for these greater rewards, he must learn to manage these greater risks, and that management is the whole art of the great merchant. He begins carefully, as he does everything. Perhaps his first ventures beyond his town are modest. Goods sent a moderate distance to a market he has studied, the risk kept within what he can afford to lose. He learns the mechanics of it, how to arrange transport, how to work with carriers and boatmen, how to protect his goods on the road, how to sell them well in a distant market where he is not known. He learns which routes are safe and which are dangerous, which seasons are good for travel and which are not, how to time his ventures so that his goods arrive when prices are high. Each journey teaches him, and he applies what he learns to the next, steadily extending his reach. He learns too the vital importance of the great waterways. In Ming China, the rivers and canals are the highways of commerce, and above all, the Grand Canal, that astonishing artificial river running for hundreds of miles to link the rich rice lands of the south with the capital and the north. Along it moves an endless traffic of barges, carrying grain and goods in quantities no road could match, and a merchant who masters the trade along this great artery has access to the wealthiest markets in the world. Our merchant learns its ways, its ports and its customs and its rhythms, and begins to send his goods along it, reaching markets far beyond anything he could have touched from his own town. With each successful long-distance venture, his capital grows and grows faster than before, for the profits of distant trade dwarf those of local dealing. And with each venture, his confidence and his knowledge grow too, and his network of contacts spreads outward, to distant towns and markets, to partners and agents in far-off places. He is becoming a merchant of wider reach, no longer bound to his single town, but operating across regions, a small node in the vast web of commerce that binds the whole empire together. The country itself seems to shrink as his reach extends, the distant places becoming familiar, the map of opportunity that he carries in his mind growing ever larger. He set out from his village to find a wider world. Now he trades across it. No merchant travels far in Ming China without coming to know the road and the river intimately, and the long journeys that his growing trade demands become a great part of his life, wearing and dangerous, and yet, in their way, the making of him. When he travels with his goods, or to seek new markets and suppliers, he joins the endless stream of movement that flows along the empire's routes. He learns the rhythm of the traveling merchant's life, the early starts and the long days, the reckoning of distances and the planning of stages, the constant small decisions on which comfort and safety depend. He learns to read the road and the sky and the faces of the men he meets, to sense danger before it arrives, to judge whom to trust and whom to avoid. The green country boy who once gaped his way to town has become a seasoned traveler, hard and watchful and capable, at home on the road as he once was in the fields. The dangers are real and constant. Bandits haunt the lonelier stretches, and a merchant with valuable goods is a tempting target, so that men travel in groups for safety and hire guards and stay alert and still sometimes are robbed or worse. The waterways have their own perils, storms and rapids, and treacherous currents, wrecks and drownings and cargoes lost. There is sickness, the traveler far from home falling ill in some strange town with no one to care for him. There are the ordinary hardships of the road, the bad food and the poor lodging, the heat and the cold and the rain, the aching weariness of endless miles. It is a hard life, the traveling merchant's, and it takes a toll on the body and the spirit that the settled man never knows. But there are the inns and the caravanserais, and the merchant lodges, the places where travelers gather at the end of a day's journey, and these are among the great pleasures and the great schools of the merchant's life. Here, over food and drink, in the warmth and safety of shelter, the travelers of the road come together, merchants and traders and travelers of every kind, from every corner of the empire and sometimes beyond it. And here, in the talk that flows in such places, is an education beyond price. Here a man learns the news of distant markets, the prices in far cities, the state of the roads, the opportunities and the dangers. Here deals are struck and partnerships formed and information traded. The merchant who is wise listens more than he speaks in such places, gathering knowledge, building contacts, weaving himself ever more deeply into the great web of commerce and information that binds the merchant world together. He comes to know the geography of his empire as few others do, not from books or maps, but from his own feet and his own eyes. The shape of the land, the courses of the rivers, the locations of the cities, the routes between them. He knows which regions produce what goods, where things are cheap and where they are dear. The whole vast pattern of the empire's commerce laid out in his mind like a map of gold. This knowledge, gathered mile by weary mile over years of travel, is among his most valuable possessions, the accumulated understanding that lets him see opportunities invisible to those who have never left their homes. And there is something else the road gives him, harder to name. A largeness of spirit, a breadth of experience, a knowledge of the world and of men that the settled life can never provide. He has seen the great cities and the empty wildernesses, the rich and the poor, the honest and the wicked, the whole vast human variety of a great empire. He has faced danger and hardship and overcome them. He has learned to rely on himself, to make his own way in strange places among strangers. He is a man of the wide world now, seasoned and capable and wise in its ways, and this too, this hard-won largeness, is part of what he has gained on the long roads, and part of what will carry him to the heights he is climbing toward. No merchant rises alone, and as his business grows, the merchant learns that his success depends less on his own two hands than on the web of relationships he builds, the partners and agents and associates who extend his reach far beyond anything he could manage by himself. At first, working alone, he could handle only what he himself could oversee, buying and selling and traveling in person, his reach limited to his own time and energy. But a business that grows beyond a certain size cannot be run by one man alone. He cannot be in two places at once, cannot watch a distant market while tending a near one, cannot travel a far route while managing his affairs at home. To grow further, he must learn to work through others, to trust others with his goods and his money and his business. And this, the building of a network of trusted associates, is among the greatest challenges and the greatest keys to his continued rise. He takes on partners, perhaps other merchants with whom he shares ventures, pooling capital to fund larger deals than either could manage alone, sharing the risk and sharing the profit. He establishes agents in distant places, trusted men who can buy and sell on his behalf where he cannot go himself, who watch the distant markets and act on his instructions and send him word of opportunities. He builds relationships with suppliers, with the producers of the goods he trades, securing reliable sources at good prices. He builds relationships with customers, with the buyers who take his goods, cultivating their trust and their loyalty. Slowly, deal by deal and relationship by relationship, he weaves himself into a web of commerce that spans regions, a network with himself at the center, through which goods and money and information flow. The foundation of all these relationships is trust, and trust, in a world without the elaborate legal and financial machinery of later ages, is a precious and fragile thing, built slowly and destroyed in an instant. A merchant's word must be good, his debts must be paid, his goods must be as he represents them. His agents must be honest and his partners reliable. In a business world that runs on personal reputation and personal trust, a man's good name is his most valuable asset. And our merchant, who understood this from his earliest days as a laborer, guards his reputation above all else. He deals fairly, he keeps his word, he pays what he owes. And over the years he builds a name for absolute reliability, a name that opens doors and secures partnerships and draws opportunities to him. a name worth more than any sum of money. He learns, too, the importance of the associations and networks that merchants form among themselves, the bonds of common origin and common trade that link merchants together into communities of mutual support. Merchants from the same region, sharing a home and a dialect and a set of customs, often band together in distant cities, helping one another, lending to one another, sharing information and opportunities, providing a network of trust and support in the strange places where they trade. To belong to such a community is a great advantage, a source of credit and contacts and helping trouble. And our merchant cultivates these bonds, giving help as well as receiving it, knowing that in the merchant's world, as in all human worlds, a man who stands alone is weak, and a man embedded in a web of relationships is strong. And so his business grows beyond the limits of his single body, extended through partners and agents and associates across the empire, a network of trust and commerce with himself at its heart. He is no longer merely a trader. He is becoming the head of an enterprise, the director of a web of relationships, a man whose reach extends far beyond where he can personally go, whose business runs even when he sleeps, whose wealth grows through the efforts of many hands guided by his single mind. This is the great transformation, from the man who does everything himself to the man who works through others. And it is the transformation that separates the small trader, forever fixed at his own scale, from the great merchant whose fortune can grow without limit. As his wealth grows, the merchant confronts a question that faces every rising man: what to do with the money, and his answer, wise and patient, is a great part of why he continues to rise while others falter. The obvious thing to do with wealth, and the thing that ruins many, is to spend it, to enjoy it, to turn the hard-won money into comfort and pleasure and display. A man who has known poverty feels a powerful pull, when money finally comes, to taste the good things he was so long denied. The fine food and the fine clothes and the fine house, the ease and the luxury and the status that wealth can buy. And there is nothing wrong with some of this, in measure. But the man who spends all he earns, however much he earns, never truly rises, for he consumes his capital as fast as he makes it, and is always, in a sense, back where he started, dependent on the next deal, one misfortune from ruin. Our merchant, schooled in poverty and hardened by years of careful saving, does not fall into this trap. The habits of frugality that kept him alive in his lean early years stay with him even as his wealth grows. And though he allows himself, in time, a comfortable life, he never lets his spending run away with him, never lets consumption outpace his growing means. Above all, he understands the single most powerful principle of building wealth, that money must be put to work, that capital reinvested grows, that the profits of one venture become the seed of the next, compounding over the years into sums that no amount of mere earning could ever produce. So he plows his profits back into his business, again and again, letting his capital build, letting his enterprise expand, resisting the temptation to consume what could instead grow. He diversifies too as his wealth grows, spreading it across different ventures and different kinds of goods and different regions, so that no single misfortune can destroy him. The wise merchant does not put all his wealth in one cargo or one venture or one market, for the world is uncertain and any single thing may fail. He spreads his risk so that the loss of one venture is balanced by the success of others, so that his fortune rests not on a single fragile pillar, but on many, and can survive the fall of anyone. This spreading of risk, this refusal to gamble everything on a single throw, is among the great secrets of the merchant, who not only rises but stays risen, who builds a fortune that lasts. And he begins, as his wealth becomes substantial, to invest beyond trade itself, into the things that store and grow wealth in an agrarian empire. Land, above all, the foundation of wealth and status in China. The safe and respected possession that a merchant's money can buy, and that yields a steady income and a secure store of value. He begins to acquire land, becoming not just a merchant but a landowner, sinking part of his fortune into the solid earth where it is safe from the risks of trade. He may lend money too at interest, putting his capital to work in yet another way. His wealth, once a small hoard of coppers hidden away, becomes a diverse and growing thing, spread across trade and land and loans, generating income from many sources, compounding year by year. This wisdom about money, the frugality that persists through prosperity, the reinvestment that compounds his capital, the diversification that protects him from ruin, the investment in solid and lasting assets, is as important to his rise as any deal he ever makes. Many men make money. Few keep it and grow it, for the keeping and growing require a discipline and a patience that the making does not, a mastery of oneself as much as a mastery of the market. Our merchant has this discipline, forged in his hard beginnings and never abandoned, and it is why his fortune, unlike so many, does not flare up and burn out, but grows steadily and surely, year upon year, into something truly great. The age in which our merchant lives is a fortunate one for a man of trade, for the Ming economy in these years is being transformed by a flood of silver, and understanding this great tide and riding it is a large part of his growing fortune. Silver has become the lifeblood of the Ming economy, the metal in which large sums are reckoned and great deals are settled, the true money of the merchant world. And in these years, silver is pouring into China in unprecedented quantities, from mines within the empire, and more from across the seas, brought by foreign traders who crave China's silks and porcelains and teas and pay for them in the precious white metal. The world wants what China makes, and it pays in silver, and that silver flows into the country in a great tide, swelling the money supply, quickening trade, driving the whole commercial economy to new heights of activity and wealth. For a merchant, this is an age of opportunity such as comes rarely. The flood of silver and the boom in trade mean that goods move in ever greater quantities, that markets grow and multiply, that fortunes can be made by those positioned to catch the flowing wealth. The demand for China's manufactures seems endless, and the merchant who can supply them, who can get silk from the weavers to the buyers, porcelain from the kilns to the ports, tea from the hills to the markets, stands to profit enormously. Our merchant, established now, experienced, well-connected, with capital to deploy and knowledge to guide it, is perfectly placed to ride this great wave. And ride it he does. He comes to understand the workings of money itself, the flows of silver, the relationships between the copper coins of daily use and the silver of large transactions, the ways that a sophisticated merchant can profit not just from trading goods, but from managing money, from credit and exchange, and the movement of funds across distances. In an economy grown large and complex, money itself becomes a kind of good to be dealt in, and the merchant who understands its flows can find profit in them. Our merchant, ever quick to grasp how things work, masters these financial arts as he mastered the trading goods, adding another dimension to his growing enterprise. He deals perhaps increasingly in the great luxury goods that are China's glory and the world's desire, the silk and the porcelain especially. These are goods of high value and high margin, the trade in which can build great fortunes, and as his capital and connections grow, he moves more and more into them, dealing in the finest products of China's workshops, the goods that grace the tables and the wardrobes of the wealthy across the whole known world. To handle such goods, to know their qualities and their markets, to move them from the makers to the buyers and take his share of their great value, is to operate at the highest level of the merchant's world. And our merchant, risen from a farmer's hut, now moves in that world as one who belongs there. The prosperity of the age lifts him, as a rising tide lifts a ship. But he is not merely lucky. Many men lived in this same fortunate age and did not rise. Many, indeed, were ruined even amid the general prosperity, through folly or misfortune or lack of the qualities that success requires. Our merchant rises because he is ready to rise, because the years of preparation, the knowledge and the capital and the reputation and the network and the discipline have made him able to seize the opportunities that the age offers. The tide lifts him because he has built a ship worthy of it. Fortune favors him because he has, through long and patient effort, made himself the kind of man that fortune can favor. And so, carried by the great silver tide of his prosperous age, and propelled by his own hard-won mastery, his fortune swells toward greatness. Not every year is a good year, and not every venture succeeds. And the mark of a great merchant is not that he never suffers loss, but that he survives it. And our merchant, in the course of his long rise, must weather his share of hard times. There come, inevitably, the setbacks. A venture fails, goods lost or spoiled or sold at a loss, a cargo taken by bandits or sunk in a storm, a market that collapses just as his goods reach it, a partner who proves dishonest or a debtor who cannot pay. These are the ordinary hazards of the merchant's life, unavoidable however careful a man is, for the world is uncertain and no amount of prudence can guard against every misfortune. Our merchant over the years suffers them all, the losses large and small that are the price of doing business in an uncertain world. There are perhaps harder times too, seasons of general difficulty when the whole economy suffers, when trade slows and prices fall and money grows tight, when even good merchants struggle to stay afloat. There may be years of bad harvests and hunger, when the countryside has no money to buy and the markets are grim. There may be disruptions, disorders, the troubles that periodically shake even a great and settled empire, wars on the frontiers, unrest, the disturbances that interrupt trade and endanger goods and make the merchant's life difficult. Through such times, a merchant must simply endure, hunkering down, protecting his capital, waiting for better days, and many do not survive them. Our merchant survives, and the reasons he survives are the reasons he has risen. His diversification protects him so that no single loss can destroy him. The failure of one venture balanced by the success of others. His wealth spread across enough different things that no single blow can bring the whole structure down. His frugality protects him. The reserves he has built up in good times, carrying him through the bad, so that a lean season that would ruin an overextended man merely slows him. His reputation protects him, his good name securing him credit when he needs it, partners standing by him, the network of trust he has built holding firm in his hour of need. His knowledge and judgment protect him, letting him see trouble coming and prepare for it, letting him make the hard, prudent decisions that preserve a business through a storm. And there is his character too, the deep resilience forged in his hard beginnings. A man who has known real poverty, real hunger, real desperation, and clawed his way up from it, is not easily broken by setback. He has been at the bottom and survived. He knows he can survive it again if he must. This knowledge gives him a steadiness in adversity that men who have never known hardship often lack, a refusal to panic, a capacity to endure loss without losing his head, to take the blow and absorb it and carry on. Where a softer man might despair or make rash decisions out of fear, our merchant holds steady, protects what he can, and waits with hard patience for the tide to turn. And the tide does turn, as it always does, the hard times passing. As hard times do, prosperity returning, the opportunities opening again. And when they do, our merchant, having weathered the storm with his capital and his reputation and his network intact, is ready to seize them, often stronger than before, for the setbacks that ruined his weaker competitors have cleared the field for him, and the assets he acquired cheaply in the bad times, when others were forced to sell, become valuable again in the good. So the very hardships that might have destroyed him become, in the end, occasions of his further rising, the storms he weathers leaving him stronger than the calm would have. This is the deep truth of his success, that it is built not only on his triumphs, but on his endurance, not only on the good times he exploited, but on the bad times he survived. As the merchant prospers, he turns his mind at last to the things that a poor young man could never afford to think of: a home of his own, a wife, a family, the founding of a household that will be both his comfort and his legacy. In his years of struggle and climbing, there was no room for such things. A man scraping his way up from nothing, saving every copper, traveling the roads, building his business, could not easily support a family, and many a rising merchant put off marriage and household until his fortune was secure. But there comes a point, as his wealth grows solid and his position steady, when he can afford at last to build the personal life that his labors were always, in part, meant to make possible. And so he marries and establishes a household and begins to found the family that will carry his name and his fortune into the future. The marriage, in the custom of the age, is a serious matter, arranged with care, a joining not just of two people, but of two families, with attention to suitability and standing and advantage. For a risen merchant, marriage is also a mark and a means of his rising, a way to cement his new status, to ally himself with other families of substance, to secure his place among the respectable and the propertied. He can now make a match that the poor young man who left the village could never have dreamed of, a wife from a family of standing, a marriage that reflects and reinforces how far he has come. He establishes a proper household, a fine home suited to his wealth, staffed with servants, furnished with the comforts and the elegancies that his money can now command. After the years of sleeping rough and eating the cheapest food and owning nothing but what he could carry, the possession of a real home, spacious and comfortable and his own, is a deep satisfaction, a solid proof of his success, a place of rest and refuge from the labors of his trade. He fills it, perhaps, with fine things, the beautiful goods that his trade has taught him to appreciate, surrounding himself with a comfort and a beauty that the boy from the mud-brick village could scarcely have imagined. Children come, and with them a whole new dimension to his life and his ambitions. A man with children thinks beyond himself, beyond his own lifetime, to the future of his line, the passing on of what he has built. His fortune is no longer merely for himself, but for his descendants, a foundation on which his family may stand and rise further. And with children comes too the great question of their future, and here the risen merchant's ambitions often take a particular turn. For the highest status in this society belongs not to merchants, however rich, but to scholars and officials, the learned men who pass the examinations and serve the state, And a merchant who has made his fortune often dreams of his sons rising higher still into that honored class through the education that his wealth can now provide. So he invests in his children, above all in their education, hiring tutors, buying books, giving his sons the schooling that he himself was denied, the schooling that might, if they have the ability and the fortune, lift them into the ranks of the scholar officials, the highest honor the society can bestow. It is a common dream of the risen merchant, this hope of transmuting commercial wealth into scholarly status, of founding a family that rises from trade into the gentry and the officialdom, and our merchant, remembering his own thwarted cleverness, the schooling he could never have, pours his hopes into his children, that they may have what he could not, and rise even higher than he has risen. In them, his ambition finds a new and larger object, reaching beyond his own success toward the greater elevation of his whole line. A merchant grown wealthy in Ming China cannot ignore the state and its officials, for the government's power over commerce is great, and learning to deal with officialdom, to navigate its demands and cultivate its goodwill, becomes an essential part of the great merchant's art. The relationship between the merchant and the state is a complicated one in this society. In the official view, in the old ordering of the classes, the merchant ranks low, beneath the scholar and the farmer and the artisan, regarded with a certain suspicion as one who produces nothing but merely profits from the exchange of what others make. This is the theory, the ancient hierarchy of respect. The reality is more complex, for merchants in this prosperous age wield great economic power and often great practical influence, and the disdain of the theory coexists with the practical importance that everyone acknowledges. Still, the merchant must be mindful of his official standing, must show proper deference, must not flaunt his wealth in ways that offend the powerful or invite their predation. For the state can be a danger to the wealthy merchant as much as an authority to be obeyed. Officials have power, and power can be used to extract wealth through taxes and levies and fees, through demands and impositions, through the many ways that those with authority can squeeze those with money. A rich merchant is a tempting target for a grasping official, and must protect himself through the cultivation of good relationships, through the careful management of his visibility, through the building of connections that can shield him from the worst predations. The merchant learns to deal with officials, to pay what must be paid, to cultivate goodwill, to make himself useful rather than merely tempting, to navigate the dangerous waters where great wealth meets great power. There are ways, too, that a merchant can turn his relationship with the state to advantage. Government contracts and monopolies and licenses can be enormously profitable, and the merchant well connected with officialdom may secure them. The state's great enterprises, its provisioning of armies and cities, its management of vital trades like salt, offer opportunities to the merchant who can position himself to serve them. Our merchant, as he grows in wealth and standing, learns to seek out these opportunities, to make himself useful to the state and to profit thereby, turning the dangerous power of officialdom, where he can, into a source of gain rather than only a threat. He learns the importance of connections, of guangxi, of the personal relationships that oil every transaction in this society, including those with the powerful. To know officials, to have done them favors, to be owed goodwill, to be connected through ties of mutual obligation to men of authority, is to have a kind of protection and a kind of opportunity that money alone cannot buy. The wise merchant cultivates such connections carefully, through gifts and favors and hospitality, through the patient building of relationships that may, in a moment of need, prove more valuable than any sum of silver. In a society where personal relationship counts for so much, the merchant embedded in a web of useful connections, reaching up into the ranks of the powerful, is far safer and far better placed than the merchant who stands alone with only his money. And there is the matter of respectability, of transforming raw wealth into acknowledged social standing. And here the merchant deploys his money in ways that go beyond trade. He gives to charity, funds public works, supports temples and schools, performs the acts of generosity and public spirit that a wealthy man is expected to perform, and that earn him honor and goodwill. He cultivates the manners and the culture of the gentry, learns to move in respectable society, sheds the roughness of his origins. Through such means he converts his commercial wealth into social respectability, rising not just in riches but in standing, becoming not merely a rich man but a respected one, a pillar of his community, a man of consequence whom even officials must treat with regard. The boy from the village, once beneath notice, becomes a man whom the powerful acknowledge, his wealth transmuted by careful effort into honor. By the middle years of his life, the merchant has arrived at a station he could scarcely have imagined when he trudged out of his village with everything he owned, knotted in a cloth, and it is worth pausing at this height of his climb to see how far he has come and what he has become. He is a wealthy man now, by any measure, his fortune grown from a hoard of coppers to a great estate of trade and land and money. His business spans regions, a network of ventures and partnerships and agents reaching across the empire, generating wealth from 100 sources, running through the efforts of many hands under his guiding mind. He owns land, that solid foundation of wealth and status, fields worked by tenants, a source of steady income and secure value. He has money at interest and stores of goods, and all the diverse holdings of a rich and careful man. The poverty that shaped his early years is now only a memory, a distant country from which he long ago escaped. He lives well, in a fine house, surrounded by comfort and beauty, his table good, his clothes fine, his household staffed with servants, his days no longer a scramble for survival, but the ordered life of a man of substance. He has a family, a wife and children, a household founded and flourishing, his sons perhaps at their studies, aiming for heights even greater than his own. He is a man of standing in his community, respected, connected, consulted, a pillar of the local order, his charity known, his goodwill valued, his consequence acknowledged even by the officials who theoretically outrank him. He has, in short, everything that the desperate young man who left the village could ever have dreamed of, and more. And yet he is, in his essence, the same man, and the qualities that carried him here have not left him. He is still shrewd, still watchful, still quick to see how things work and where advantage lies. He is still, at the core, frugal and disciplined, never letting his wealth make him careless or soft, never forgetting the hard lessons of his poverty. He still works, still attends to his business, still makes the careful decisions on which his fortune depends, for he knows that a fortune, however great, must be tended, that wealth neglected melts away, that the same diligence that built his riches is needed to preserve them. Success has not made him idle or foolish. It has confirmed and rewarded the very qualities that produced it. He has changed, of course, in other ways, softened and broadened and deepened by his long journey. The hunger that drove him, the raw, desperate need to escape and to rise, has been satisfied, and in its place is something calmer, a settled confidence, the ease of a man who has arrived. He has seen much and learned much, of the world and of men and of himself. He has known hardship and triumph, poverty and wealth, the depths and the heights, and this vast experience has given him a wisdom and a largeness that the sheltered rich, born to their wealth, seldom possess. He knows the value of things because he has lived without them. He knows the worth of money because he has counted his life in single coppers. He is rich, but he is not spoiled by his riches, for he remembers always where he came from. It is a remarkable thing, this ascent, this journey from the bottom of the world to something near its heights, accomplished not through birth or luck alone, but through decades of effort and intelligence and discipline and endurance. Not every man could have done it. Most, born where he was born, lived and died in the poverty they were born to. That he did not, that he climbed so far, is a testament to his qualities and his will, and to the opportunities of his prosperous age, and to the mysterious workings of fortune that favor some and not others. He has made himself, from almost nothing, into a great merchant, a wealthy man, a person of consequence. The climb is not quite finished, for such climbs rarely are, but he stands now very near the summit of what a man of his origins could ever hope to reach, and he can look back from this height across the whole long road he has traveled with a quiet and well-earned satisfaction. Let us follow the merchant now through the great cities where his business takes him, for the cities of Ming, China are among the wonders of the age, vast and rich and teeming, and it is in them that the merchant's world reaches its fullest flower. The great cities of this empire are among the largest in the world, home to enormous populations, centers of manufacture and trade and administration and culture on a scale that dwarfs anything our merchant knew in his youth. To walk their streets is to move through a density of human life, almost overwhelming. Quarters given over to particular trades, markets selling every conceivable good, workshops turning out the manufactures that the whole world craves, temples and gardens and mansions and the great public buildings of the state. For a merchant, the great city is the ultimate arena, where the largest deals are struck, the finest goods are found, the greatest fortunes are made and lost. He comes to know these cities intimately, their markets and their merchants, their particular specialties and opportunities. He knows where the silk merchants gather and where the porcelain is traded, where the money changers keep their tables, and where the great wholesale markets stand. He knows the rhythms of the city's commerce, its seasons and its cycles, the times of feverish activity and the times of quiet. He has his lodgings and his contacts and his regular haunts in the cities where he does business, so that arriving in them is no longer the bewildering ordeal it once was, but the comfortable return of a man who knows his ground. He witnesses, in these cities, the extraordinary refinement that great wealth and long civilization produce. The luxury goods in which he increasingly deals are the products of astonishing skill. The silk woven in patterns of great beauty, the porcelain of a delicacy and perfection that no other land can match, the lacquerwork and the jade carving and the countless other arts brought to a pitch of excellence by generations of masters. To handle such things, to know their qualities, to move among the makers and the connoisseurs and the wealthy buyers who prize them, is to move in a world of beauty and refinement, far removed from the mud and toil of his origins, and he has learned over the years to appreciate these things, to develop the cultivated taste of a man who deals in the finest products of a great civilization. He sees, too, the pleasures and the culture of the great city, the world of entertainment and refinement in which the wealthy pass their leisure, the tea houses and the restaurants, the gardens and the theatres, the whole elaborate social life of a rich and sophisticated urban society. As a man of wealth now, he can partake of these pleasures, can move in cultivated society, can enjoy the fruits of the civilization his trade helps to sustain. The boy who knew only the village and its poverty has become a man at home in the greatest cities of the world, moving easily through their wealth and refinement, a participant in the high urban culture of his age. And he sees the other side too, as any observant man must, the poverty that exists alongside the wealth, the beggars and the laborers and the desperate poor who crowd the same cities as the rich, the underside of the glittering urban world. He remembers, seeing then, his own beginnings, his own days of hunger and desperation, and he knows how thin the line is that separates the fortunate from the wretched, how easily he himself might have ended among the city's poor rather than among its rich. This memory keeps him humble in his way and compassionate and mindful of the fortune that has carried him from one condition to the other. He moves through the great city as a wealthy man, but he never quite forgets the poor young man he was, or the crowds of the poor among whom, but for his qualities and his luck, he might still be numbered. The goods in which our merchant deals are the glory of his civilization and the envy of the world, and it is worth lingering on them, for to understand the merchant is to understand the wares that pass through his hands, and few wares in all of history have been so prized. There is silk, first and most famous, the thread spun by the humble silkworm and woven by the patient skill of countless workers into cloth of a beauty and a luxury unmatched anywhere. The making of silk is a vast and ancient industry, from the tending of the mulberry trees whose leaves feed the worms, to the careful raising of the worms themselves, to the unwinding of their cocoons into thread, to the weaving and dyeing of the finished cloth in patterns of great richness and intricacy. Silk is light and strong and beautiful, warm in winter and cool in summer, taking dye in glorious colors, and it has been prized across the whole world for thousands of years, carried along the ancient routes to the farthest lands, a byword for luxury and refinement. To deal in silk is to deal in one of the supreme creations of human craft. There is porcelain, that other great glory of Chinese making, the fine, hard white ceramic that no other civilization has yet learned to match. Made from special clays, fired at tremendous heat in great kilns, it emerges translucent and resonant and strong, and decorated, often, with painting of exquisite delicacy, the blue and white wares above all, famous across the world. Whole cities are given over to its making, vast quantities produced for the domestic market and for export across the seas, and the finest pieces are treasured by the wealthy and the powerful everywhere. To handle porcelain, to know the good from the poor, to move it from the kilns to the buyers, is to deal in an art that is also a marvel of manufacture, beauty, and technical mastery combined. There is tea humbler than silk and porcelain, but traded in even greater quantity, the leaf that is dried and processed and brewed into the drink that the whole society and much of the world beyond cannot do without. Tea grows in the hills, is picked and processed with great care, is graded into countless varieties from the common to the exquisite, and moves in enormous volumes through the channels of trade, a staple of commerce, a necessity of daily life, a good in which steady fortunes are made. Our merchant knows its grades and its sources, its markets and its seasons, and profits from the ceaseless demand for it. And there are the countless other goods of a vast and productive civilization, cotton cloth for the clothing of the common people, produced now in great quantities, and paper, and books printed in enormous numbers, and lacquerware and metalwork, and every kind of manufacture, and the products of the land, grain above all, moving from the fertile regions to feed the cities and the deficient areas. The merchant lives amid this astonishing abundance, this vast flow of goods produced by the labor and skill of a great people, and his trade is to know it, to move within it, to direct the right goods to the right markets, and take his share of the wealth that flows through the whole enormous system. To deal in these goods is to be a servant, in a sense, of the vast productive machine of his civilization. The countless farmers and weavers and potters and craftsmen whose labor creates the wealth that he merely moves. He makes nothing himself, he grows nothing, weaves nothing, fires no kiln. And yet his function is essential, for without the merchant to move the goods, to carry them from where they are made to where they are wanted, the whole system would seize up, the weaver's silk rotting unsold, while the distant buyer went without. He is the connector, the mover, the one who bridges the gap between production and consumption. And for this service he is rewarded richly, and through it he has built his fortune, out of the great flowing abundance of the goods of his remarkable age. A great merchant's enterprise, grown large, is a complex thing to run, and our merchant, in his prosperity, must be not merely a trader, but a manager, an organizer, the director of an operation with many parts and many people, and the skills of management become as important to him as the skills of trade. His business is no longer the simple buying and selling of a lone trader. It is an enterprise with many branches, dealings in various goods, ventures in various places, a network of agents and partners and employees, stores of goods and holdings of land and money at interest, a whole complex structure that must be overseen and coordinated and kept in order. To run such a thing requires more than a good eye for a bargain. It requires the ability to organize, to delegate, to keep track of many things at once, to manage people, to maintain order and honesty across a far-flung operation that no one man can personally watch. He must keep accounts, and the keeping of accounts is a serious and skilled business. The recording of all the transactions and holdings and debts and credits of a complex enterprise, without which no large business can be controlled. He employs, perhaps, clerks and bookkeepers to maintain the records, but he must understand them himself, must be able to read the state of his business in the figures, to see where money is being made and where lost, to detect error or dishonesty, to know at all times how his affairs stand. The merchant who cannot master his own accounts is at the mercy of those who keep them, and our merchant, careful and shrewd, keeps a firm grip on the reckoning of his wealth. He must manage people, and this is among the hardest of the arts. He employs agents and clerks and servants and laborers, and he must choose them well and motivate them and keep them honest and get good work from them across distances that prevent his personal supervision. He must judge character, discerning the trustworthy from the false. For a dishonest agent in a distant place can rob him blind. He must inspire loyalty, so that his people serve him faithfully, even when unwatched. He must balance firmness with fairness, discipline with reward, in the management of the many hands through which his business runs. The skills of dealing with people, of leading and managing and judging them, become central to his success as his enterprise grows. He must plan and think ahead and coordinate the many parts of his business into a working whole. He must decide where to deploy his capital, which ventures to pursue and which to avoid, how to balance risk and opportunity across his whole operation. He must think about the future, about the trends of the markets, about where opportunity is growing and where declining, positioning his business to profit from what is coming, rather than merely what is present. He must, in short, exercise the higher functions of the businessman, the strategic thinking and the organizational skill that direct a large enterprise, functions quite distinct from the simple trading with which he began. And he must, through all of this, maintain the thing on which everything ultimately rests, the reputation, the trust, the good name that is the foundation of all his dealings. As his business grows and his transactions multiply and his dealings extend to more and more people across greater and greater distances, the maintenance of his reputation for honesty and reliability becomes ever more important and ever more challenging. One dishonest agent, one broken promise, one shoddy dealing, magnified across his far-flung operations, could damage the good name on which everything depends. So he must instill his own standards of honesty throughout his enterprise, must ensure that all who act in his name uphold his reputation, must guard, across the whole complex structure of his business, the precious and fragile trust that is its true foundation. The great merchant is thus not only a trader, but a builder and keeper of an institution, an enterprise that bears his name and reflects his character, and that must be managed with skill and care and constant attention to endure and to prosper. With wealth and standing comes a new set of concerns, the concerns of a man who has something to protect and something to pass on, and the merchant in his maturity turns his mind increasingly to the securing and the perpetuation of what he has built. The making of a fortune and the keeping of it are different arts, and the keeping in some ways is the harder. A fortune, once made, is under constant threat from the ordinary risks of business, from the predations of the powerful, from the uncertainties of the world, and above all, perhaps, from the difficulty of passing it intact to the next generation. Many a great fortune, painstakingly built by a founder, is squandered by his heirs, dissipated in a generation or two by sons who lack the founder's qualities, who inherit the wealth but not the discipline and shrewdness that produced it. Our merchant, having built so much with such effort, is deeply concerned that it should not be so wasted, that what he has made should endure. He thinks, therefore, about the transmission of his fortune, about preparing his heirs to preserve and grow what he will leave them. He tries to instill in his children the values that made him, the frugality and the diligence and the shrewdness. Though this is hard, for children raised in wealth cannot easily be given the hard schooling of poverty that shaped their father. He tries to educate them in the management of the fortune they will inherit, to prepare them for the responsibility, to make them worthy stewards of what he has built. And he arranges his affairs, as best he can, to preserve the fortune across the generations, through the acquisition of land, which endures, through the careful structuring of his holdings, through all the means by which a prudent founder tries to make his fortune last. He turns, too, to the securing of his family status, the consolidation of the social position that his wealth has won. It is not enough for lasting security to be merely rich, for wealth without standing is vulnerable, exposed to the predations of the powerful and the contempt of the established. The merchant seeks, therefore, to root his family firmly in the respectable order of society, to make it not merely wealthy, but honored and secure, through the marriage of his children into families of standing, through the education of his sons toward the honored ranks of the scholars and officials, through the acquisition of land and the assumption of the manners and the culture of the gentry. He seeks, in short, to transform his family from a family of merchants, however rich, into a family of established position, secure in a status that mere wealth can never fully provide. The dream of many a risen merchant, and perhaps of ours, is that his sons or his grandsons will pass the examinations, will enter the ranks of the scholar officials, will lift the family from the world of trade into the world of learning and office, and the highest honor the society can bestow. This is the ultimate elevation, the transmutation of commercial wealth into scholarly and official status, the founding of a gentry family from a merchant fortune. It does not always happen. The examinations are hard, and success in them requires ability and fortune as well as money. But it is the goal toward which the ambitious merchant strives, investing his wealth in the education of his heirs, hoping that they will achieve the standing that he, whatever his riches, could never quite attain, being a merchant and not a scholar. In these concerns, the securing of his fortune and the elevation of his family, we see the merchant's ambition reaching beyond himself and beyond his own lifetime, toward the future of his line. He built his fortune from nothing by his own effort. Now he seeks to make it endure, to found not merely a fortune, but a family, a lineage that will carry his name and his wealth, and, he hopes, his elevated status down through the generations to come. His climb, which began as the desperate effort of a poor young man to escape his poverty, has become the founding of a house, the establishment of a family that may stand and prosper long after he is gone. This is the deepest ambition of the successful man, to be not merely rich in his own life, but the founder of an enduring line. And toward this ambition, our merchant, in his maturity, increasingly bends his efforts and his hopes. A wealthy man in this society is expected to use his fortune not only for himself and his family, but for the good of his community. And our merchant, as he prospers, becomes a patron and a benefactor, and finds in this giving both duty and pleasure, and a further kind of rising. The wealthy man who hoards all and gives nothing is despised in this society as in most, regarded as mean and selfish, unworthy of his fortune. The wealthy man who gives generously, who uses his riches for the public good, is honored, respected, praised, his standing raised, his name made good. Generosity is thus not only a virtue but a strategy, a way of converting wealth into honor and goodwill. And the wise merchant, understanding this, gives and gives well and reaps the respect and the security that generosity brings. He gives to his community in the ways that a wealthy man is expected to give. He funds public works, the bridges and roads and other useful things that serve the common good and that a rich man's money can provide. He supports temples, contributing to their building and their maintenance, an act of piety and of public benefit both. He gives to the relief of the poor, especially in hard times, in famines and disasters, when the generosity of the wealthy can mean the difference between survival and death for the suffering. He supports education, funding schools, helping poor but able students, contributing to the learning that the society prizes so highly. In these and other ways, he pours part of his fortune back into the community, doing good and gaining honor together. He remembers, perhaps especially, his origins, and gives to the kind of people and places he came from. He may do much for his home village, the poor place he left so long ago, returning to it now as a great man, a benefactor, funding improvements, helping his kinfolk, honoring the place and the family from which he sprang. There is a deep satisfaction in this, the return of the poor boy as the rich man, the ability to lift now the people and the place among whom he once struggled, to be the benefactor where he was once the beggar. And there is honor in it too, the honor of the successful man who does not forget his roots, who uses his fortune to raise up his origins, greatly esteemed in a society that values such filial and communal loyalty. This giving is bound up too with the values of his culture, with the ideals of virtue and benevolence and social responsibility that the society at its best upholds. The truly admirable wealthy man in this ideal is not merely rich but virtuous, using his wealth in accordance with the moral teachings that the culture reveres, benevolent and responsible and mindful of the good of others. Our merchant, whatever the mixture of his motives, participates in this ideal, gives as a good man is supposed to give, and in doing so affirms his place not merely as a rich man, but as a good and honored member of his society, a man of virtue as well as wealth. And in the giving he finds perhaps a satisfaction deeper than the honor it brings. To have risen from nothing to the point where he can be a benefactor, where his money can build and relieve and educate and help, where he can be a source of good in the world rather than a struggler for his own survival, is a profound fulfillment, a sign of how far he has come, a meaning for his wealth beyond mere accumulation. The poor boy who once received the charity of others, the few coins his father pressed on him, the kindness of a stranger on the road, can now be the giver, the source, the one whose generosity flows out to others. In this reversal, this passage from the receiving to the giving of help, he finds one of the sweetest fruits of his long labor and one of the truest measures of his rise. Let us consider the merchant among his own kind, in the community of merchants to which he belongs. For the merchants of this age are not isolated individuals, but members of a distinct world, with its own bonds and institutions and culture. And our merchant's life is deeply woven into this fellowship of trade. Merchants, especially those who travel and trade far from home, have need of one another, and out of this need arise the bonds and institutions of the merchant community. Merchants from the same region, sharing a home and a dialect and a set of customs, tend to band together in the distant cities where they trade, forming communities of mutual support far from home. They lodge together, help one another, lend to one another, share information and opportunities, stand together against difficulties. To belong to such a community of fellow regionals in a distant city is a great source of strength, providing the traveling merchant with trust and credit and help and companionship in places where he would otherwise be a friendless stranger. These communities build institutions to serve their common needs. They establish guild halls and lodges, places where the merchants of a particular region or trade can gather, do business, socialize, worship, and organize their common affairs. These halls become the centers of the merchant communities in the great cities, homes away from home, where a merchant far from his native place can find his own people, his own customs, his own gods, a piece of home in a distant land. They provide meeting places, lodging, storage, the settling of disputes, the organization of mutual aid, all the functions that a community of merchants requires. Our merchant belongs to such associations, frequents such halls, draws on the support they provide, and contributes to it in turn. There is a culture to this merchant world, a set of shared values and practices and understandings that bind the community together. There is the deep emphasis on trust and reputation, the understanding that a merchant's word must be good, that the whole edifice of commerce rests on the reliability of those who conduct it. There are the shared skills and knowledge of the trade, the common understanding of how business is done. There are the shared experiences of the traveling life, the roads and the markets and the distant cities that bind those who have lived them. There is even a kind of merchant ethic, a code of how a good merchant behaves, honest and reliable and shrewd but fair, that the community upholds and by which it judges its members. The merchant community also provides, in a society that officially ranks merchants low, a world in which they are valued and respected on their own terms. Among his fellow merchants, our man is judged not by the disdainful standards of the scholar officials who look down on trade, but by the standards of the merchant world itself, where success and skill and reliability in business are honored, where a great merchant is a great man. Within this world he can find the respect and the standing that the wider society, with its official contempt for trade, may withhold a community of peers who understand and value what he does and what he has achieved. And so our merchant lives his life embedded in this fellowship of trade, this world of merchants with its bonds and institutions and culture, drawing from it strength and support and companionship and respect, and contributing to it in turn his own participation and generosity and reputation. He is not a lone figure, a solitary accumulator of wealth, but a member of a community, a participant in a whole social world of commerce. And much of the richness and the security and the meaning of his life comes from this belonging, from his place in the great fellowship of the merchants of his age. The years pass, as years do, and the merchant, once young, grows old, and the story of his rising becomes, at last, the story of a long life lived, full and rich, drawing toward its close, and there is a particular quality to these later years that is worth dwelling on. He is an old man now, or growing old, his climbing done, his fortune made, his position secure. The fierce energy of his youth and middle years, the driving hunger that carried him up from nothing, has mellowed into something quieter, the settled contentment of a man who has achieved what he set out to achieve, and more. He no longer needs to strive as he once strove. The fortune is made, the family established, the name secured. He can rest, now, in some measure, can enjoy the fruits of his long labor, can pass his days in a comfort and a security that the young man who left the village could scarcely have imagined. He passes much of his business, perhaps, to his sons or his younger partners, stepping back from the daily labor of trade, taking on the role of the elder, the patriarch, the wise head who advises and oversees rather than doing everything himself. This passing of the enterprise to the next generation is a delicate matter, for on it depends the survival of all he has built, and he attends to it carefully, preparing his heirs, guiding them, trying to ensure that his fortune passes into capable hands and endures beyond his own lifetime. It is a kind of letting go, this handing over, not always easy for a man who built the enterprise himself, but necessary, and he does it as wisely as he can. He enjoys in these later years the pleasures that a lifetime of labor has earned him. The comforts of his fine home, the company of his family, the respect of his community, the leisure to cultivate the refinements that his wealth allows, the appreciation of the beautiful things his trade has taught him to love. He may cultivate the arts, or scholarship, or a garden, or the collecting of fine objects, or whatever pursuits a cultivated wealthy man of his age might enjoy, the graceful occupations of a life no longer driven by need. He has time now for these things, time that the striving years never allowed, and he uses it to enrich the twilight of his life with beauty and pleasure and repose. He reflects too, as old men do, on the long road he has travelled, the whole vast arc of his life, from the poor village to the height of wealth and standing. What a journey it has been, what a distance covered, from the hungry boy with empty hands to the honored patriarch of a wealthy house. He remembers the village, the leaving, the hard early years, the slow climb, the setbacks weathered, and the opportunities seized, the whole long story of his rising. He remembers those who helped him, the master who took him up, the partners and friends, the family he founded. He remembers, too, the poverty from which he came, and marvels, perhaps, at the strange fortune that carried him so far from it, when so many others, no less deserving, remained where he began. And there is, in these reflections, a deep and quiet satisfaction, the satisfaction of a life well lived, an ambition fulfilled, a great thing accomplished by one's own effort. He set out, so long ago, to escape his poverty and to make something of himself, and he has done it. beyond anything he dared to hope. He has risen from the bottom of the world to near its heights. He has founded a family, secured its future, honored his origins, done good in his community, lived to see the fruits of his labor. Few men accomplish so much, few climb so far. As he sits in the comfort of his later years, an old man now, honored and secure, surrounded by the evidence of his success, he can look back on his life with a rare and well-earned contentment, knowing that he made, from almost nothing, a great and good and lasting thing, and that his long climb, whatever its cost, was worth the climbing. Let us step back now from the particular life of our merchant and consider the wider world that made his rise possible. For no man rises in a vacuum, and the story of our merchant is also the story of an age and a society that, for all its rigidities, allowed a poor boy to climb. The Ming was, in its prosperous middle period, a society of remarkable commercial vitality, and this vitality was the soil in which fortunes like our merchants could grow. The economy was vast and productive, generating an abundance of goods that flowed through wide networks of trade. Money, especially silver, circulated freely, quickening exchange. Cities grew great and rich, centers of manufacture and commerce. The waterways carried goods in enormous quantities across great distances. It was, for its time, an economy of extraordinary scale and sophistication, and it offered to those positioned to seize them opportunities for the making of wealth that few societies in history have matched. And it was, despite the official hierarchy that ranked merchants low, a society with real avenues for advancement, real possibilities for a poor man to rise. The rigidities were real, the disdain for trade, the low official standing of merchants, the barriers of birth and status. But alongside them ran real fluidity, real opportunity, real channels by which a man of ability and effort and fortune could climb from poverty to wealth, and even, through the education of his heirs, from wealth toward the honored ranks of the gentry. The society was not as open as some later ages would be, but it was not closed either, and it allowed, to the exceptional and the fortunate, the kind of ascent that our merchant achieved. The opportunity was unequal, of course, and precarious, and available to few. Most who were born poor lived and died poor, lacking the ability, or the fortune, or the ruthless discipline that rising required, or simply crushed by the hardships that fell so heavily on the poor. For every one who rose, countless others did not, and the rise of the few was built, in part, on a society whose wealth rested on the labor of the many who never shared in it. Our merchant's success was real and admirable, but it was exceptional. The achievement of a remarkable individual in a society that offered opportunity to some while denying it to most. Still, the possibility was there, and it mattered, both for the few who seized it and for the whole tenor of the society. A world in which a poor boy could, by his own effort, rise to wealth, was a world with a certain dynamism, a certain hope, a certain reward for enterprise and ability that a wholly closed society would lack. The merchants who rose brought energy and wealth into the society, drove its commerce, funded its public works and its charities, sent their sons into its scholarship and its officialdom. The channel of advancement that our merchant traveled was one of the arteries through which the society renewed itself, drawing talent and energy up from below, and it was part of what made the Ming, in its great age, so vital and so prosperous a civilization. Our merchant, then, was both an exceptional individual and a product of his age, his rise, the achievement of his own remarkable qualities, and the gift of a society that, for all its flaws, allowed such rising. He seized the opportunity, But the opportunity had to be there to be seized, and it was there because of the particular character of his time and place. The commercial vitality, the fluidity, the channels of advancement that made the Ming a place where a poor boy with the right qualities and the right fortune could climb to the heights. In telling his story, we tell also the story of that age and of the possibility it held, the possibility, rare and precious in human history, of rising by one's own effort from the bottom of the world toward its top. Let us step inside the counting house, the heart of the merchant's enterprise, and pass an ordinary working day there, for it is in such places, undramatic and orderly, that the real work of a great business is done. The counting house is a room of quiet, purposeful activity, the nerve center from which the merchant directs his affairs. Here are the account books, the great ledgers in which every transaction is recorded, the debts and credits and stores and sales that make up the living record of the business. Here are the clerks bent over their work, brushes moving, recording and reckoning, keeping the endless tally on which the control of the enterprise depends. Here the merchant himself sits or moves among his people, overseeing, directing, deciding, the master of this small ordered world of commerce. The day begins early, as merchant days do. There are the accounts to review, the state of the business to be grasped, the figures telling their story of profit and loss, of goods coming and going, of money owed and owing. The merchant reads them with a practiced eye, seeing in the columns of figures the health of his enterprise, noting what prospers and what lags, catching the small discrepancies that might signal error or dishonesty, holding in his mind the whole complex picture of his far-flung affairs. This mastery of his own accounts, this ability to read his business in its records, is among the foundations of his control, and he attends to it daily, never letting the reckoning of his wealth slip beyond his grasp. Then there are the callers, the steady stream of people who come to the counting house to do business, and the merchant receives them, one after another, through the day. There are suppliers offering goods, and buyers seeking them, and the negotiation over each, the assessment of quality, the haggling over price, the striking of the bargain. There are agents reporting from distant markets, bringing news and settling accounts and receiving instructions. There are partners to consult, and debtors to press, and creditors to satisfy, and the endless small transactions and relationships of which a great business is woven. The merchant moves among them all, shrewd and courteous and firm, doing the human work of commerce, but dealing with people on which everything ultimately rests. There are decisions to be made all through the day, some small and some large. Whether to buy this cargo or pass on it, whether to hold this stock or sell it, whether to extend credit to this man or refuse it, whether to pursue this opportunity or avoid that risk. Each decision draws on the merchant's whole store of knowledge and judgment, his understanding of goods and markets and men, his sense of the shifting opportunities and dangers of his trade. Trade is a matter of ceaseless small judgments, each modest in itself, but compounding over the years into the difference between fortune and ruin, and the merchant makes them day after day with the accumulated skill of his long experience. And through it all runs the quiet discipline, the order, the attention to detail that marks the well-run enterprise. Everything is recorded, everything is checked, nothing is left to chance or memory that can be written down and verified. The goods are counted, the money weighed, the accounts balanced, the whole operation held in a web of careful reckoning that prevents the errors and the frauds and the confusions that destroy careless businesses. It is not glamorous, this daily discipline of the counting house, but it is the true foundation of the merchant's success. The patient, orderly attention that, sustained over decades, builds and preserves a great fortune. And as the day ends, The account squared, the collars gone, the business set in order for the morrow. The merchant closes his ledgers with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has done, well and carefully, the undramatic work on which his whole great enterprise is built. Money itself, its handling and its nature, is a great part of the merchant's world, and it is worth pausing on the actual stuff of wealth in this age, the coins and the silver. For the money of the Ming is a curious and interesting thing, quite unlike the money of our own time. There is, first, the copper coin, the money of everyday life, the small round coins with a square hole in the center, strung together on cords in hundreds and thousands. These are the money of ordinary transactions, of the market and the shop and the daily needs of common people, and they pass through countless hands in enormous numbers. But they are cumbersome for large sums, heavy and bulky, a great weight of metal for a modest value, and no one could conduct a large business in copper coin alone, for the sheer physical mass of the money needed would be impossible to handle. So for larger transactions, there is silver, and silver is the true money of the merchant world, the medium in which serious wealth is reckoned and serious deals are settled. But the silver of this age is not coined, not minted into standard pieces of fixed value as later money would be. It circulates, rather, as bullion, as lumps and ingots and fragments of the metal, valued by weight and by fineness. To use it, one must weigh it on the small, precise scales that every merchant carries and assess its purity, for silver varies in quality, and a given weight of fine silver is worth more than the same weight of debased. The handling of money thus becomes a skilled business in itself, the weighing and the assessing, the reckoning of value in a currency measured out on scales. The merchant carries his scales and knows how to use them, and knows silver, its qualities and its values, as he knows his trade goods. He can judge the fineness of a piece of silver, can weigh it accurately, can reckon its worth in the copper coin of daily use, can navigate the complex and shifting relationships between the different forms of money. This financial skill, this mastery of the money itself, is a necessary part of his craft. For a merchant who could be cheated on the very silver he was paid in would not last long, and our merchant, careful and knowing, is never cheated, but handles the money of his trade with the same expert judgment he brings to the goods. And there are, in this sophisticated commercial age, more advanced instruments too, ways of handling money and credit beyond the physical passing of metal. There are arrangements for the transfer of funds across distances without the dangerous shipping of actual silver, ways for a merchant to pay or be paid in a distant city without the metal itself making the perilous journey. There are forms of credit, of lending and borrowing, of deferred payment that allow business to be done on a scale beyond what immediate cash would permit. The merchant world has developed, over long experience, a whole apparatus of financial technique, and a sophisticated merchant, our man among them, masters these techniques, using credit and transfer and the instruments of finance to extend his reach and multiply his dealings beyond what the mere handling of coin and silver would allow. Behind all of this lies the great fact of the age, the flood of silver pouring into China from across the seas, swelling the money supply, quickening the whole commercial economy, making possible the boom in which our merchant prospers. The silver that he weighs on his scales has come, much of it, from mines in distant lands across the ocean, carried to China by foreign traders, hungry for her silks and porcelains, part of a vast global flow of the precious metal that binds China to the wider world. Our merchant, weighing his silver in his counting house, is a small node in this immense global system, his local dealings connected, through the flowing silver, to mines and markets on the far side of the earth. The money in his hand is a thread in a web that spans the world, and in handling it, he handles, all unknowing, a piece of one of the great economic transformations of his age. Let us travel with the merchant once more on a journey along the Grand Canal, that mighty artificial river that is the great highway of his commerce. For a voyage along it shows us the empire's trade in motion and the merchant in his element. The Grand Canal is one of the wonders of the age, an enormous waterway dug by human hands over centuries, running for many hundreds of miles to link the rich rice lands and the great cities of the south with the capital and the north. Along it flows an endless traffic, a ceaseless procession of boats and barges carrying the goods of the empire. Grain above all, the vast tribute of rice that feeds the north, but also every other kind of merchandise, silk and porcelain, and tea and cloth and timber and salt, the whole abundance of a great commercial civilization moving on the water. To travel the canal is to move along the very artery of the empire's economic life. The merchant's boat joins this great traffic, one vessel among thousands, laden with his goods, making its slow way along the water. The pace is unhurried, the boat moving at the speed of the current and the pole and the tow line, and the days pass in a slow procession of water and bank and sky. There is time on such a journey for the merchant to rest, to think, to watch the passing world, a welcome pause in the ceaseless activity of his trade. The banks slide by, the fields and villages and towns, the whole populous landscape of the empire unrolling slowly before him, and the merchant watches it pass, familiar with it from many such journeys, at ease on the water that has carried his fortunes so many times. The canal is lined with the life of commerce. There are the towns and cities strung along it, the ports and markets where goods are loaded and unloaded, where the merchant may stop to do business, to buy and sell, to gather news of prices and opportunities. There are the great locks and other works that carry the canal over changes in the level of the land, marvels of engineering that the merchant passes through in the slow, patient manner of canal travel. There are the customs stations where duties are collected, the officials and their exactions, a necessary friction of the journey. There is the whole busy apparatus of a great trade route, and the merchant knows it all, its ports and its customs and its rhythms, from long familiarity. On the boat itself there is the small society of the voyage, the boatmen who work the vessel, and any fellow travellers, and the merchant's own people if he travels with servants or agents. There is the routine of the journey, the meals and the rest, the tending of the goods, the watch against the hazards of the water. There is companionship and conversation, the exchange of news and stories among those who share the voyage, the small social world of the travelling boat. And there is for the merchant the quiet monitoring of his cargo, the goods on which the profit of the venture depends, watched and tended and protected through the long, slow days of the passage. And at the journey's end, there is the market, the destination where the goods are to be sold, and the merchant arrives, his cargo intact, ready to reap the reward of the venture, to sell in this distant market the goods he bought cheap in another, to gather the profit that the difference in prices, bridged by the long canal voyage, has created. This is the merchant's art in its essence, the moving of goods across distance, to capture the difference in value, and the Grand Canal is the great instrument of it, the mighty waterway along which the goods and the fortunes of the empire flow. The merchant has travelled it many times, will travel it many more, and each voyage is a link in the long chain of his commerce, a patient passage along the artery of the empire's wealth, carrying his goods and his fortunes on the slow and steady water. Among the goods the merchant deals in, none is more marvelous than porcelain, and let us follow it back to its source, to to the great city where it is made, for the making of porcelain is one of the wonders of the age, and to see it is to understand the skill and the labor that lie behind the beautiful things the merchant trades. There is a city, famous throughout the empire and beyond, given over almost wholly to the making of porcelain, a place where the potter's art has been brought to a pitch of perfection unmatched anywhere in the world. The whole city breeds porcelain. Its kilns burn day and night, their smoke rising over the rooftops. Its workshops employ vast numbers of workers, each skilled in some part of the intricate process. Its whole economy, its whole life, revolves around the production of the fine ceramic that is one of China's greatest glories and one of the world's most coveted goods. To walk through this city is to walk through a marvel of manufacture, an industry of astonishing scale and skill. The making of porcelain is a long and complex process, involving many hands and many stages. It begins with the special clays, dug and prepared and refined with great care, for the quality of the clay determines the quality of the ware. The clay is shaped, on the wheel or in molds, into the forms of the vessels, the bowls and vases and dishes and countless other shapes, by potters of great skill whose hands know the material intimately. The shaped pieces are dried, and often painted, decorated by artists whose brushes trace the delicate designs, the blue and white patterns above all famous, that make the finished ware so beautiful. Then they are glazed and fired in the great kilns at tremendous heat, a delicate and dangerous stage on which the success of all the previous labor depends, for a kiln improperly fired can ruin a whole load of ware. The division of labor is minute and elaborate, the process broken into many specialized tasks, each performed by workers who do that one thing and do it expertly. There are those who prepare the clay, and those who shape it, and those who paint it, and those who glaze it, and those who tend the kilns, and many more, each a specialist, the whole coming together in a coordinated process of great sophistication. It is, in its way, a kind of mass production, the making of enormous quantities of ware, through the organized labor of many specialized hands, an industrial achievement remarkable for its age, producing porcelain in volumes that supply not only the vast domestic market, but a great export trade across the seas. For the merchant, this city is a source, a place where the beautiful goods he trades are born, and he comes here to buy, to select from the output of the kilns the wares he will carry to distant markets. He walks among the workshops and the warehouses, assessing the ware, choosing the pieces of quality, negotiating with the makers and the dealers, filling his order with the goods that he will sell far away at a handsome profit. His trained eye judges the porcelain, the fineness of the body, the perfection of the glaze, the quality of the painting, selecting the good and rejecting the flawed. For his reputation depends on the quality of what he sells, and a merchant known for fine wares commands better prices and better custom. And as he handles the beautiful finished pieces, the merchant may reflect, if he is a thoughtful man, on the long chain of skill and labor that has produced them, the diggers of the clay and the shapers and the painters and the kiln tenders, the countless workers whose coordinated craft has made these marvels. He makes nothing himself, he only moves what others make. But he is the link between the city of makers and the distant buyers who covet their work, the one who carries the porcelain from the kilns where it is borne to the tables where it is treasured, across the great distances that separate the making from the wanting. In this function, humble in a way and yet essential, he plays his part in the great system that brings the beautiful things of the world to those who desire them, and earns for his part in it the profit that has built his fortune. The year has its rhythm, its round of seasons and festivals, and the merchant's life, for all its commerce, moves within this larger cycle, and it is pleasant to follow him through the turning of a year, and especially to its great festival, the celebration of the new year. Trade has its seasons, as all things do. There are the busy times, when goods move and markets bustle and the merchant is fully occupied, and there are the quieter times, when commerce slows and a man may rest a little. There are the seasons of particular goods, the times when this or that commodity comes to market, the rhythms of supply and demand that shape the merchant's year. And there are the seasons of travel, the times when the roads and waters are good for journeying, and the times when they are not, the summer heat and the winter cold, the rains and the dry spells, that govern when goods can move and when they must wait. The merchant lives within these rhythms, planning his ventures around them, working with the seasons rather than against them. And there are the festivals, the great communal celebrations that punctuate the year. And these the merchant observes along with everyone else, for however absorbed in his trade, he is a member of his society and its culture, a participant in its shared rituals and joys. There are the festivals of the seasons, the observances tied to the agricultural year, and the turning of the calendar, the days of remembrance and celebration that mark the passage of time. The merchant keeps these as his neighbors do, pausing his commerce to observe the customs, to honor the gods and the ancestors, to share in the communal life of festival and celebration. Greatest of all is the New Year, the supreme festival of the calendar, the time when the old year is sent off and the new one welcomed, when families gather and debts are settled, and the whole society pauses from its labors to celebrate. For the merchant, the new year has a particular significance, for it is traditionally the time of the settling of accounts, when debts are called in and paid, when the books of the old year are closed and those of the new opened. There is a flurry of business before the festival, the reckoning and settling of the year's dealings, and then the pause, the celebration, the gathering of the family, the observance of the customs that bind the society together. In his prosperity, the merchant keeps the new year well, in his fine home, with his family about him, in the comfort and abundance that his wealth allows. There is the feasting, the special foods of the season, the family gathered, the customs observed. There is the honoring of the ancestors, the rituals of respect to those who came before, in which the merchant, founder of a rising family, has a particular part, mindful of the line he is establishing, the descendants who will one day honor him as he honors his forebears. There is the giving and receiving, the gifts and the good wishes, the renewal of relationships that the festival occasions, and there is rest and joy, and the warmth of family and celebration, a pause from the ceaseless labor of trade. The merchant, keeping the new year in his comfortable home, may remember other New Years, the New Years of his poverty, when the festival was kept in the poor village with what little the family had, or the lonely New Years of his early struggle, kept far from home among strangers, poor and striving. How different this is, the abundant festival of his prosperity, the fine home and the gathered family and the plentiful feast, from those lean celebrations of his hard beginnings. In the contrast, he measures again the distance he has traveled, the height he has climbed, and gives thanks, perhaps, to whatever gods or fortune have carried him so far. And then he turns back to the celebration, to the family and the feast and the warmth, enjoying in the great festival of his people the comfort and the security and the abundance that his long labor has won. One day there comes to the merchant's counting house a young man seeking work, poor and hopeful and green, and in him the merchant sees, as in a mirror across the years, the boy he himself once was, and the meeting stirs something deep in him. The young man is much as the merchant was long ago. He is from a poor family, from the countryside, come to the town to seek his fortune with nothing but his willingness and his wits. He is nervous and awkward and trying to hide it, trying to seem more than he is, exactly as the merchant once tried. He is hungry, in every sense, hungry for the chance to prove himself, to begin the climb, to escape the poverty that would otherwise be his lot. The merchant, receiving him, looks at him and sees across the long years the young man who once stood, just so, poor and hopeful and afraid, at the beginning of everything. And the merchant, who was once given his own chance by a master who saw something in him, understands that he is now on the other side of that ancient exchange, that he is now the established man who may lift up a hopeful youth as he was lifted up so long ago. It is a moment of quiet significance. This recognition, the wheel come full circle, the one who was raised now able to raise another. He remembers his own master, the man who took a chance on a diligent unknown boy and thereby made his fortune possible. And he feels the pull of that memory, the desire to do for this young man what was once done for him. So he takes the young man on, gives him his chance, sets his feet on the first rung of the ladder as the merchant's own feet were once set. And he watches him in the months that follow with a particular interest, seeing whether the boy has the qualities that rising requires, the diligence and the honesty and the shrewdness and the discipline, the willingness to work and to save and to learn and to wait. Some who are given the chance have these qualities and rise, others do not and fall away. The merchant, who knows better than anyone what it takes, watches to see which the young man will prove to be. And he teaches as he was taught, passing on the hard-won knowledge of his craft, the understanding of goods and markets and money, the arts of trade that he absorbed over so many years. He instructs the young man in the mysteries of the business, guides him, corrects him, shares with him the wisdom of his long experience. There is a satisfaction in this teaching, in the passing on of knowledge to a worthy successor, a sense of continuity, of the craft handed down from one generation to the next, of his own long accumulated understanding living on in the young man he instructs. The merchant, growing old, finds in this transmission a meaning and a pleasure, the sense that what he has learned will not die with him but continue. And perhaps in this young man, or in others like him whom he takes up over the years, the merchant finds a kind of legacy beyond his own family, a line of successes in the craft, hopeful youths lifted from poverty as he was lifted, taught the arts of trade as he was taught, sent on to make their own fortunes and, in their turn, to lift up others. It is a chain reaching back beyond him to his own master and that master's master, and forward beyond him to the young men he raises and those they will raise in turn, a lineage not of blood but of craft and of opportunity, the endless passing on of the chance to rise. In taking up the poor hopeful youth, the merchant honors his own beginnings, repays the debt he owes to the master who lifted him, and adds a link to the long chain of rising that stretches, generation upon generation, through the merchant world. And the young man, given his chance, sets out on his own long climb, as the merchant once set out, at the beginning of everything, with nothing but his hopes and his willingness and the great chance he has just been given. Let us spend a quiet evening with the merchant in his home, in the comfort of his prosperity. For after all the striving and the travelling and the dealing, it is in such quiet domestic hours that the fruits of his labour are most sweetly enjoyed. The evening comes, and the day's business is done, the counting house closed, the affairs of trade set aside until the morrow. The merchant returns to his home, his fine and comfortable house, the solid proof and the pleasant reward of his long success. He passes from the world of commerce into the world of the household, from the striving of the market to the peace of the home, and the transition is itself a pleasure. The laying down of the day's cares, the entry into rest and comfort and family. The house receives him, warm and well appointed, staffed with servants who see to his comfort, furnished with the fine things his wealth and his cultivated taste have gathered. After the poverty of his youth, the bare survival of his early struggle, the endless hard travel of his rising years, the simple comfort of a fine home is a deep and abiding pleasure, never quite taken for granted by a man who remembers so vividly what it was to have none of it. He moves through his comfortable rooms among his beautiful possessions with the quiet satisfaction of a man enjoying what he has earned, mindful still in some corner of his mind of the hungry boy who could never have dreamed of such ease. His family is about him, the wife and children for whom, in part, he labored all these years, the household he founded and raised up. There is the pleasure of their company, the warmth of family, the conversation and the small doings of domestic life. There is the satisfaction of seeing his children well, growing, perhaps at their studies, the hopes of the family riding on them. There is the whole rich texture of family life, denied to him in his years of solitary struggle, now his to enjoy. The human warmth and belonging that no amount of mere wealth could provide, but that his wealth has made possible. In the bosom of his family, the merchant finds a contentment deeper than any profit, the fulfillment of the human bonds for which, in the end, much of his striving was meant. The evening meal is a good one, abundant and well prepared, a far cry from the watery gruel of his childhood or the cheap poor food of his struggling years. He eats well now, as a wealthy man does, enjoying the fine food that his money commands and his taste appreciates, and the meal is not merely nourishment, but pleasure, a daily small celebration of his prosperity, taken in the comfort of his home among his family. He remembers hunger, the real hunger of the poor, and so he savors his abundance with a keenness that those who have never known want can rarely feel. And after the meal, there is leisure, the precious leisure of the successful man, the time to rest and to enjoy the refinements that his wealth allows. Perhaps he reads, or contemplates his collection of fine objects, or enjoys some cultivated pursuit, or simply sits in the comfort of his home, at peace, his labors done for the day, his fortune secure, his family about him. It is a quiet hour, undramatic, one of countless such evenings in his prosperous years. And yet it is in such hours, more than in any triumph of the market, that the true reward of his long climb is realized, the simple, deep comfort of a good life, hard won and fully enjoyed. The poor boy from the village has come, at last, to this, a warm home and a full table and a loving family and a mind at peace. In the quiet of the evening, and it is enough, and more than enough, the fulfillment of everything he ever hoped for when he set out so long ago into the wide and frightening world. As the merchant grows old and reflective, his thoughts turn increasingly to the meaning of his long journey, to the strange workings of fortune that carried him so far, and to a kind of gratitude and wonder at the whole improbable arc of his life. He thinks, sometimes, of how easily it might have gone otherwise. So much of his rise, he sees clearly now, depended not only on his own effort, but on chance, on fortune, on the countless small turns of luck that might so easily have gone the other way. Had the master not taken him up, had that early venture failed, had he fallen ill on the road, had any of 100 misfortunes struck at the wrong moment, his whole rise might have collapsed, and he might have ended as so many of his origins ended, poor and obscure and forgotten. He worked hard, and he was shrewd, and he was disciplined, and these were necessary. But they were not sufficient. Fortune too had to favor him, and it did, and he knows that it might not have, and this knowledge fills him with a humble wonder at his own improbable success. He thinks of all those who did not rise, the many against whom his own rising must be measured. The brothers and cousins who stayed in the village and lived and died in poverty. The fellow laborers of his early years who never climbed out of the bottom. The countless poor of the towns and the countryside, no less deserving than he, perhaps no less hard-working, who yet never found the opportunities he found, or never had the fortune to seize them. His success was exceptional, the achievement of the few against the many, and he knows it, and the knowledge tempers any pride with the sober awareness of how unusual his ascent was, how many others, no worse than he, never had his luck. He feels, too, a gratitude to the many who helped him along the way, to his parents, who gave him what little they had and sent him off with their blessing, to the master who lifted him up, to the partners and friends and associates who trusted him and dealt with him and helped him rise, to all the hands, seen and unseen, that smoothed his path, that gave him his chances, that made his climb possible. No man rises entirely alone, and the merchant, looking back, sees clearly the many to whom he owes his success, and feels toward them a warm gratitude, a sense of debt repaid, in part, through his own lifting up of others in his turn. And he reflects on what it all has meant, this long climb, this life of striving and rising. He has gained much, wealth and comfort and standing and family, everything he set out to gain and more. But he has spent much too. The years of his life, the toil and the worry and the endless labor, the hardships of the road, the cares of the great enterprise. Was it worth it? He thinks, mostly, that the life he built was a good life, richer and fuller and better than the life of poverty he escaped. And yet he knows too that wealth is not everything, that the striving for it can consume a life, that there are goods beyond the material that matter as much or more, and in his old age he values, perhaps, more than the wealth itself, the family and the friendships and the good he was able to do, the human goods that his wealth served rather than the wealth alone. In these reflections there is a mellowness, a wisdom, the settled understanding of a man who has lived a full life and thought about its meaning. He is grateful for his fortune, humble about his success, mindful of those less lucky, aware of both the value and the limits of the wealth he pursued. He has climbed as high as a man of his origins could hope to climb, and he knows the worth of the climb and also its cost, and he holds both in a kind of balance, the pride and the humility, the satisfaction and the sober awareness that mark the wisdom of a thoughtful man at the end of a long and remarkable life. And in this balanced understanding, this grateful and humble contemplation of his improbable journey, he finds a peace deeper than any his wealth alone could give. And so we come to the end of our merchant story, and to the end of our long night together. And it is time, gently, to bring both to a close. We began so many hours ago with a poor young man in a small village at the very bottom of the world, with empty hands and an empty purse, and nothing before him but the hard certainty of a poor man's life. And we have followed him, step by patient step, across the long years of his rising, out of the village and onto the road, into the great town, through the lowest labor and the first small trades, through the apprenticeship and the striking out on his own, through through the building of his business and the extending of his reach, through the setbacks weathered and the opportunities seized, through the founding of his family and the securing of his fortune, up and up, by effort and discipline and shrewdness and no small measure of luck, to the heights of wealth and standing that he reached at last. It has been a long climb, and we have climbed it with him, and now, at the end, we may rest. His story is one of countless such stories, most of them never told. The stories of the men and women who, in every age, have striven to better their condition, to rise from poverty toward comfort, to make something of themselves against the odds. Most such strivings end not in triumph, but in the ordinary muddle of a life lived as well as circumstances allow. A few, like our merchants, end in remarkable success. But all of them, the triumphs and the failures alike, are woven of the same human stuff, the same hopes and efforts and struggles, the same longing to rise, and in telling one such story, we honor, in a way, all of them, the whole vast human striving to make a better life. There is comfort, perhaps, in a story like this, a story of patient effort rewarded, of a good man rising by his own qualities from poverty to prosperity. It speaks to something deep in us, the hope that effort matters, that the world offers, at least sometimes, to at least some, the chance to rise, that a life can be built from small beginnings into something good and lasting. Whether the world is truly so just, so rewarding of effort, is another question, and our merchant's own reflections remind us how much of his rise was luck as well as labor. But the hope remains, and the story nourishes it, and there is a warmth in that, a quiet encouragement, that makes such a tale a fitting companion for the drift towards sleep. For now, the night is far gone, and it is time to let the story go, as the merchant himself, at the end of his long life, let go of all his striving and his wealth and his cares, and passed, as all must, into rest. His fortune passed to his heirs, his name to his descendants, his story into the long memory of his people, and he himself into the peace that comes, at last, to every life, however great or small, when its labors are done. And we, who have followed him through this long night, may now let go as well, releasing the story, releasing the day, releasing all our own cares and strivings, and sinking gently into the rest that waits for us. So let your thoughts grow quiet now, and your body grow heavy, and your breathing slow. There is nothing more to follow, nothing more to hold. The merchant has made his fortune and lived his life and gone to his rest, and his long story is told. And your night's work too is done, whatever it was, and you have earned your rest as surely as he earned his. Let it come now, the sleep that heals and restores, the deep sweet rest at the end of the day. The story is over, the night holds you, and there is nothing left to do but sleep. Rest well, sleep deeply. Good night.